And especially that once the military intervenes and puts tanks to close down, certain government buildings and, such as the parliament, it's very hard for the population to, oppose the army or to negotiate or have a dialogue with the army. What do you think about the role of the army so far in Tunisia?
I'm not on the ground, and so I'm depending on reports that I read in the press. Yeah. I would say that the good news is that the army has not declared formally that it supports a dictatorship, and it has not objected to democracy itself, nor has the army tried to impose its own dictator, which, as we know, is something that has happened in some other Arab countries in similar circumstances. That's a version of what happened in Egypt. So that's on the positive side. And historically, the Tunisian military, including during the Arab Spring, played a relatively constructive role in the transition to democracy, at least compared to the role that the military played in some other Arab Spring countries. On the downside, the military also did not stand up and say, we're going to refuse to obey orders that are given outside of the Constitution. And so to the extent that reports that there was a military presence outside the parliament after the president had unlawfully suspended the parliament, to the extent that that is correct, to me that's unfortunate, because it means that the military was enforcing an unconstitutional and unlawful set of orders. Now, the one thing I will say, again, in some mitigation is the military are not judges. And you can understand that in the ordinary course of events, if the civilian authority issues an order and the order is not obviously unlawful or unconstitutional, usually the military will follow the order, and because of the principle of civilian control. Under the Tunisian constitution, there's supposed to be a constitutional court that would have declared that the president's actions were unlawful, but because of political inability to solve political challenges in the country, that court was never brought into existence. And so it's asking a lot of the military to stand in place of the constitutional court and say, well, this was an unlawful order, because they're not lawyers and they're not experts. And in the initial suspension of parliament, again, it was unlawful in my view, but I'm a constitutional lawyer who also studied the Tunisian constitution and watched part of its ratification up close. So I think it's unconstitutional, but I could imagine someone saying at first that it was not an unconstitutional order, and then that created a norm of obedience. And then by the time the president did something that's obviously unlawful, it's hard for the military to reverse course. So I would prefer that the generals had privately told the president, you have to follow the Constitution, and if you don't, we're not going to obey you. And I would prefer if they had taken a stronger stand, but I want to be cautious about saying that the military should have deposed the president or anything like that, because then you could get a military coup, and that could potentially be even worse than the civilian coup d'etat that has currently occurred. So it's a delicate question.